Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the world. Welcome to a brand new season and brand new episode of Vestiges After Dark, coming to you live on this March 1st, 2021 from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I'm Bishop Bryan Ouellette here with my co-host today, Sister Mary Joan, and we're going to be taking open lines. Your questions, your paranormal problems. You can call into the show, and we'll do what we can to assess or answer those questions that you might have. And it should be a real interesting 2 hours. Stay tuned. Well, welcome everyone to a brand new season. It's been quite a while since we've had an episode of Vestiges After Dark. I do apologize for that, but it's sometimes just a lot of work, and I just have limited time. But these days, I have a little bit more to give in my schedule, and we have some new resources that have come in recently that have allowed us to put more effort into the other areas of our ministry. And so I know that the podcast is one of the things that people really appreciate the most from everything that it is that we do at the Nicholean Church, the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church. And so it's our pleasure, honestly, to be able to offer this broadcast and to be able to bring it back with yet a new format again. It's gone through numerous incarnations since Vestiges After Dark was originally created. And we're going to try a new platform today. I hope that is something that works. I think it sometimes can be a little, rough getting off the ground because it's so new and something that people are not completely familiar with yet. But today we're going to try open lines. Okay, and we've never really done an open lines show. This has never been that kind of talk show. We sometimes would have guests on, rarely, but most of the time it was more instructional. Vestiges of Christianity, its sister show, the show that started it all, is all instructional. And we've been airing on Spreaker. So most of you have only known it through the Spreaker platform. And this will be on Spreaker. It's not on Spreaker tonight yet. It will archive to Spreaker. So those of you who do follow the Spreaker channel, don't worry. It will be there eventually. Maybe not for a day or so, but it will definitely be there soon. And what we are doing here, I'm going to actually bring it up here so I can talk to you about some of the things to look for because I've been working very hard on distribution of this podcast. So right now, as it exists, Vestiges After Dark is now available on Apple Podcasts. It will be available on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, and it may also be appearing on some additional ones, including Amazon Music and Castbox. I have not gotten word back from them yet, but they are already confirmed on the ones I just mentioned. Of course, this show is now airing from Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio gives us certain features that Spreaker does not, or I should say it's more complicated on Spreaker, and it's actually so complicated that it made more sense to just take it over here to Blog Talk Radio. We're also on the Nicholean channel on YouTube. So, this is another way for those of you, I know a lot of you like to watch rather than listen. And a lot of you prefer just turning on your televisions, your smart televisions, or on your computer or tablets or, smartphones or whatever, and just prefer to watch it. And so you can see a live video feed of me on, at my desk here talking to the world on this show tonight by just tuning into our YouTube channel. That can be accessible directly from our website. That's esotericcatholic.org. esotericcatholic.org or Nicholeancatholic.org. You can go to either, Nicholean.org, not Nicholean Catholic, my apologies. It's Nicholean.org or esotericcatholic.org. And just click on the channel to the YouTube channel, and you'll be able to find this feed. It's the live one. Or you can just search on YouTube for Nicholean Catholic. It should come right up. And my voice is still not completely recovered. I did have a sinus infection. I've been on antibiotics for the last couple of days, and I'm starting to finally feel better. My congestion is clearing. I actually enjoyed my meal tonight, which is great. I could taste it. And so, I still have a little bit of congestion in my nasal cavity. It's a little bit inflamed, but nowhere near as bad as it was a couple of days ago. The antibiotics are definitely working. So bear with me. My voice is not at 100%, but we're getting there. For those of you who are new to this new format and maybe have never even listened to Vestiges After Dark, this show is a paranormal podcast, okay? It's something that can really open up your minds to new ways of looking at things. I am not your typical bishop. I'm not your typical exorcist. And I'm definitely not your typical paranormal investigator. I don't follow a lot of the models that are common in that arena or that genre of study. And I call it a genre of study because, let's face it, paranormal research is more suited to reality television these days than it is to academia. Academia really doesn't have much use for it. Those are the kinds of things that I think make it a little bit more difficult to pin down, and you have people with their own opinions about things. And so what I have tried to do is make a simplified model that is something that's accessible predominantly to people who are people of faith, people who are religiously minded and or church focused. And this hopefully will resolve some conflicts you might have with the idea of being, associated with anything that has to do with the paranormal, because let's face it, some Christian circles don't necessarily condone it. And not that I necessarily condone it either, for just the sake of, I guess, supernatural entertainment. It shouldn't be that. But there's some value to studying it. And this church finds a great deal of value in studying it, because it helps us with our work and in what we predominantly do in our outreach, which is demonic investigation, as well as spiritual problem resolution. And spiritual problem resolution is the focus now of the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church. A very important thing for us to do is to be able to fully study a problem, to identify its causation, and to be able to effectuate a solution for people that are in crisis. If you watch Ghost Adventures on Discovery Plus, previously on the Travel Channel, then you might have seen me a few times with my colleague tonight, Sister Mary Joan, who is now with us. Sister, how are you doing tonight?
Good evening, all. Glad to be here. Hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah, it's great that you've been able to join us, and that you could take some time out of your schedule. I know that you're busy tomorrow, and you have to get up early, so I appreciate the fact that you're here with us tonight, and be able to take some calls, and hopefully we'll have some issues to resolve.
Nope, I really actually missed doing Vestiges After Dark. I actually looked it up. It was April of last year was your last podcast.
Yeah, I believe that. It seems like it would be right, and it's been a long time, and I hope this new format is something that works. It's a lot more expensive for us, but I think it's something that can definitely enrich the value of this show and encourage people to maybe seek help. That's what we're really all about. I mean, we are a ministry ultimately, even though we fall into a lot of different arenas, some of which is, again, reality television and entertainment, as well as religious. But it is about helping people, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you break it down. It's about educating and helping people. So that's what this show aims to do. So if you're new to this show, I know a lot of you on Blog Talk Radio might have never heard of this show. This channel has been here a long time. It used to be Vestiges of Christianity on Blog Talk Radio way back when, 8-9 years ago. But now it's going to be serving this purpose for this show, Vestiges After Dark. Vestiges of Christianity, for those of you who do like that show, if we do air new episodes of that one, it will air on Spreaker. But Vestiges After Dark will air here on Blog Talk Radio now, and then be archived over to Spreaker, just so you guys know. If you are interested in talking to us tonight, if you have a paranormal story or a ghost experience or an issue spiritually, religiously, maybe even dealing with things on on some kind of esoteric or metaphysical level, and you would like to ask our advice and get maybe some direction, some very basic assessment. I mean, of course, there's only so far we can go without being able to go to your house and seeing what's really going on, but we can kind of give you an idea of what to look for. If you'd like to talk to us about anything, this is open lines. This show, to start this season, is open lines. No specific topic. It's all open. You guys are the guests. You guys run the show tonight. So give us a call. That number to call is 516-453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. If you need time to go get something to write that down, I'll give you another couple minutes, and I'll say it again so that you guys can start calling into the show, and we will start taking calls from you. By all means, don't feel like there's any particular topic you have to stick to. Even though this is a show on the paranormal, we also cover numerous areas as well. Anything that's of the sort of supernatural department, something that's very appropriate to this show. And like I said, esotericism, religion, anything, feel free. Call in. Let us know what's on your mind. I know we get questions all the time on social media. I've got almost 19,000 followers on Twitter right now. And there's always questions coming in. There's always things that people want answered. And so it's a lot easier to talk to you directly and to do it in a way that educates other people. So this is what this show's really, this new format is really all about. So please give us a call. 516 453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. And if you call in, we will maybe take your call and see what we can do, or at least answer your question, or even if you just want to chat and talk about some experience you've had. That's what Open Lines is all about. It's kind of fun.
Yes, tell us a ghost story.
Yeah, I mean, we're always up for that, right? There's also a chat room on Blog Talk Radio. I know you guys are not used to Blog Talk, and like I said, I fully expect that the first show here, it's going to take a few shows before we can really get this thing rolling. And we're new to Blog Talk, so Blog Talk doesn't really know, the Blog Talk Radio audience doesn't really know about us yet, because again, this channel has been active in more than 8 years. There's a chat room on Blog Talk. You can follow us on Blog Talk. You can create a free account on Blog Talk Radio and log in there and chat, as well as following us on YouTube. The YouTube channel. And actually, right now, I'm seeing a lot of activity on the chat room there. So, hi all on YouTube. I'm glad that you guys could make it. I know that a lot of you prefer watching on YouTube, and I think the sound's actually a little bit better on YouTube. That's fine too. You can ask questions there too. But we prefer tonight that you call in. Typically, we take questions on the chat, and we might do that if anyone's too shy to call into the show. But tonight, we'd like to really actually physically talk to you, make this a real talk show, a real call-in show. 516-453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. And we might take your call and find out what's on your mind. In the meantime, while we wait for you guys to come up with numerous questions or anything that you'd like to discuss with us, I'd like to just mention that we have been hard at work with getting the ministry, the outreach back off the ground. Now that we are coming out of, hopefully, the pandemic, hopefully the vaccines, and the fact that there have been so many infections over the last year, that hopefully now people are finally starting to talk. The accepted professionals are starting to talk about herd immunity, which is, of course, a really good thing, a really good sign, because it would mean that life can start getting back to normal. So with life getting back to normal, that also means that we can hopefully start resuming operations. And we are always getting new caseloads in. There's always a new case coming in. I'd say several a week. People from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, but a lot of them are local cases, because that's what we're currently asking, because travel's just not something that we can do right now. It's just not feasible. But we're always getting new cases coming in, and people seeking help. And one of the things that we notice a lot, which is a big problem, and something that I think needs to be addressed for those out there listening to this show and wondering about whether or not they should reach out to us for help, is, one of the first things that we see that is almost always an indicator that this is a case we're not going to take, is when people come at us and immediately start demanding that they need an exorcism. Sister Mary Joan, who handles a lot of these cases, will tell you that that is the biggest warning sign that we see. And it might seem like, it's a reasonable thing for people to reach out to an exorcist for. But what you don't understand is coming to an exorcist is a lot like coming to a doctor, particularly like a doctor that works with cancer patients. Okay. You don't go to your doctor and say, I think I have, or no, not even I think. You don't go to your doctor and say, I need chemotherapy. Now I've got cancer. You don't do that. If you suspect that there's something wrong that hopefully is not cancer, but could potentially be cancer, and you need your doctor to look into it, hopefully you would go to him and get some testing done. And then he tells you whether or not you have cancer, and then he tells you whether or not you need chemotherapy. You don't make your first call to the doctor demanding chemotherapy without even having been tested for cancer. You don't even know if it's cancer. You let your doctor decide that, don't you? I mean, that's a reasonable thing. Well, when you come to an exorcist and you reach out and the first thing out of your mouth is, I need an exorcism, no one else will help me, you better help me, that is not the way to approach us or anybody in this field. I can tell you that's probably why you're not getting any help. Because exorcism and demonic possession in particular is so rare, okay, that you almost never need an exorcism, and certainly a person who actually has the kind of problem that would require an exorcism is not going to want one. And the last person they want to talk to is someone like me. So
yeah, we've actually got a couple of cases now where it's been a next of kin or a friend that is called, trying to make the outcry for a family member. And the first thing I ask is, well, are they willing to have help? Well, no, they don't think anything's wrong with them. Well, that tells me there may be something to it, but then we have the other issue of the client, the actual victim, needs to be willing to take our help. And a lot of times the next of kin or friend doesn't understand that. We can't force anybody to get help.
No, we can't force help, and certainly we do not just jump to exorcism as a solution or fix-all for all things, paranormal or otherwise. Understand that most of the time, these things are of psychological or emotional origin. And sometimes there can be a spiritual or paranormal component to that. We actually just did a case recently that we took a case last month that falled into that category. It was absolutely a person who believed they needed exorcism, but upon doing a full and thorough investigation and finding that there was indeed some limited paranormal activity going on, it still ultimately was a primarily psychological/emotional issue. And it's not appropriate to seek exorcism for that, and it would not be appropriate or professional for an exorcist to perform an exorcism on someone that that category falls into. You just don't do that. All right? That's just not a thing that you do. So, let us make the decision as to what needs to be done. You're coming to us as professionals for help. The first thing that you need to do is be open to what that help might mean. And sometimes that help might not be, the rights of the church as much as it is a referral to a psychologist. And that's not, to say that we think you're crazy. It's really about dealing with internal conflict and how internal conflict can sometimes bleed out into the phenomenal world around you, and that can sometimes excite paranormal activity. If a person's very emotional, that can create paranormal activity too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we see that all the time, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So,
and our last case was a good example of that.
A perfect example of that. And, this is why it's important to go through the process, why we have protocols, why we work very hard at those protocols. So understand that, when you reach out to us and you send in your intake form from the website and you're seeking help and you hope that we show up, okay, the first way to get us to say no is to just demand an exorcism. That we're just not even going to take that seriously, because that automatically tells us the most important thing that we need to know. Maybe I shouldn't even be mentioning this because I'm giving away a little bit of the secret of assessment. But I can tell you right now, you won't want us coming if you need us coming.
True that.
Yeah. You'll run. And so the last thing you're going to do is be looking us up online and being like, please come and help me. I need an exorcism. That just does not work like that. Now, that doesn't mean there might not be the need for a minor exorcism. Sometimes that does occur, and you would be within the faculties of your mind to seek that, even though there might be some apprehension there. But overall, you still have to let us make those assessments and make that decision. This is a professional operation. There's a professional process to this. We work very hard at maintaining those protocols to keep for your safety, and so that you get the help that you actually need, not the help that we're not witch doctors coming in and just doing witch doctory things. We want you to get better, and usually that means going to a medical doctor, not an exorcist. But not to say that the church can't help pastorally. And so, when we go on these cases, one of the criticisms we see from, I guess, atheists and people that don't like what we do, sometimes we'll say, they need a psychiatrist. You shouldn't even be involved in this. Well, understand that even without the exorcism ministry, okay, maybe that's not your cup of tea. That's fine. It's not really my cup of tea either, believe it or not. I do it just because it's my obligation to, as a priest, that there are certain situations that do require the rights of the church to be able to root out and eliminate demonic involvement. I mean, that's just part of the Christian life. However, that being said, one of the things that I always work to do is I still have a pastoral obligation. So when a person is in crisis, even if it is an emotional or psychological crisis, or even a neurological one, something that's purely physiological, that just has this, other component, and they think that there's demons afflicting them, okay, I still have a pastoral obligation to that person. I still need to make a pastoral visit if I can, if it's appropriate, if I should, and help them at a pastoral level. So the sacrament of unction, otherwise known as the sacrament of the sick, is a wonderful tool in this regard. Sometimes a house blessing is a wonderful tool in this regard. Sometimes a solemn blessing of a sick person is a wonderful tool in this regard. Mm-hmm. And so when we show up, it's pastoral. So when you even see us on Ghost Adventures, it might have the title, Exorcism and Eerie, and they'll have these, Sin City Exorcism, these titles that grab your attention, have a little bit of shock value and whatnot. Even then, these things that you've seen us do were pastoral visits. They were not. We were not.
They don't get to see a lot of the. I'm sorry. They don't get to see a lot of what's done beforehand, and a lot of what they see on TV. It's just bits and pieces.
That's right. I mean, the problem with doing television is the fact that it is always so limited. In it has to follow its protocol. So on a 1 hour show with commercials, you're looking at 43 minutes, and in that time they have a whole lot of things they want to show you, and they want to tell a story at the same time. And even though, fortunately, Ghost Adventures is not a scripted show, we wouldn't be on it if it were, honestly. It still has to tell a story, even though it's not scripted. It still is telling you the story of the family we're going to see, or how the problem began and what the background is and what's going on. It has to tell a certain narrative for it to be interesting television. And what that means is there's only so much that can be shown. So when Sister Mary Joan and I show up to a location, we're there for several hours, and you typically only get to see maybe 15 minutes of us being there. Sometimes less. It's been a lot of less, on a few of them, where we were only at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
But, that's something always to keep in mind. So for those of you out there, if you've got something you'd like to share with us, if you've got questions, if there's something that you've always wanted to ask an exorcist, if there's something you just want to ask a priest, if there's a paranormal disturbance that you're having and you want some idea as to what we think of it, give us a call, 516-453-0138. We'll take you on the air right now, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see what we can do to direct you, or at least lead you in a good direction. This is a great opportunity. I know that it's funny because we've done sort of this before, mostly with the chat, though. I've done these shows before with the chat, where we have people ask questions, and people always have so many questions when when they're coming in at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on Twitter, and I can't even get them all out, can't even sleep because I'm answering these questions on social media. But yeah, it's like when I reserve some time and I set up a show to take questions, then all of a sudden everyone gets really antsy and doesn't want to call in. So don't let that be you. We're not going to bite your head off. It's a perfectly safe space.
I think there's a little anxiety with actually calling in and us hearing their voice.
It probably is. It's a little bit easier to type out a message. It seems much less personal, much more, I guess you could say, objective. It's removed from reality a bit, and I think that's also why we see so much trolling on social media. It's so much easier for people to put on this aura of courage that they would never tell you these things
anonymous.
to your face. Yeah. And this is anonymous. Understand, we're not gonna take anything more than your first name here. So if you're worried about somebody knowing who you are, it's really just going to be your area code and your name. That's it. Your first name. Don't give us your last name. We don't need it. We don't want it. But the number to call is 516-453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. See, they changed the number on me. It used to be different. So I'm having a hard time remembering this one. But, I haven't done Blog Talk Radio in, my goodness, 8 years, Sister Mary Joan. It's been 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah. We moved it
way before my time.
Yeah, it was way before you knew of me. We knew each other, and way before even the Ghost Adventures fans knew. I mean, that's only been the last 3 or 4 years. But Blog Talk Radio was I was one of the pioneers on Blog Talk Radio. I had been when it first started, and it used to be free back then, believe it or not. Now they charge hundreds to thousands of dollars for the various platforms and plans that you can utilize on this network. But there was a time where it was free, and I started back then. And we did a show on basically New Agey topics, New Agey research, theosophy. I'm sorry, not theosophy. Yeah, well, I guess you could say it was theosophy. There was just a lot of different topics that we would cover, a lot of things on UFOs, and we got into like the Ouija boards and things like that too. Mediumship, tarot. Studied, divination. It was a show, and it started on Blog Talk Radio, and we take callers, and it was fun. But the problem with it is, as it became bigger, and then they started charging, and they started working on doing enhancements that ended up being not so wonderful. The sound quality was terrible. You used to have to call in directly from your telephone. So even the host didn't sound very good. It's like, it's okay for your callers to be on the telephone. That's fine. But it becomes a whole different matter when, you sound like you're talking on a telephone as the host of the show. Back then nobody cared because podcasting was new. But it was. It got to a point where there were even times where we'd do a show and it would kick us off, and the show would cancel itself, and we were having so many technical issues with it that we gave up and decided to look for another service, and that's when we found Spreaker. And Spreaker's wonderful. The sound quality is, I think, to this day, the best sound quality out there as far as podcasting goes. It's a wonderful service. It's actually quite affordable. Problem with it is you can't take callers. You can take Skype, but if you have, once you get a show that starts having thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of listeners, and you get 50 to 100, 200 calls coming in, you can't manage that on Skype. You can barely manage 2 calls on Skype, let alone, hundreds. And so Blog Talk Radio does give this wonderful option for taking calls. And this is an experiment. I mean, I am doing this as a service to you guys. And tonight is your show. Tonight, this is your opportunity to ask your questions directly, and we can talk about this and see what comes up. But, you know, if nobody, if you don't like this format, we'll probably go back to the old one, you know. But this is an experiment. We're going to see. The number to call us is 516-453-0138. That's 516-453-0138. If you give us a call, you might get taken on the air. We'll ask you questions about what's going on, and we'll see what we can get to the bottom of. Let me go to the chat over here on YouTube and see what's going on here. Does anybody have any kind
Aaron.
of idea? Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to see if anybody's got anything in the chat on YouTube that you'd like us to talk about while we wait for somebody to develop the courage to call. I'm actually kind of surprised that we haven't gotten a lot more callers, because the questions are coming in all the time, whether it be through email, whether it be through Facebook, or on, mostly on Twitter. My instant messages are always, so much that I can't even keep up with them. So I'm actually kind of surprised that we're not seeing more people call in tonight. But I guess now it's a little bit real, like you said, sister.
Well, Aaron in the chat room's got a question. Can you go more in depth on the requirements for an exorcism?
Yeah, sure. The requirements for an exorcism. In order for us to actually approach that, we need to be able to determine that the issue is primarily caused by some kind of demonic involvement, some kind of demonic infestation or demonic attachment to either a person or an object in that person's life. And the only time we will ever pull out the tool of exorcism is when we have confirmed that it is genuinely demonic. And even sometimes there are things that will parallel the demonic that are not necessarily satanic. And there is a difference between something that is satanic and something that is demonic. Okay? Demonic, you could very loosely define for our purposes, is anything in the spiritual realm that is not healthy for human beings to interact with. So you can see how very quickly that could mean a lot of things that are not necessarily of a satanic nature. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, let's face it, from that definition, you could even say that radioactive waste is demonic. You could. You could loosely say that. But there are spiritual entities, you could, for lack of a better way of putting it, that are not healthy for us to be around. Most of these fall into the category of what is known as elementals, and most of the interactions with them are by accident, but no less demonic in the sense that they can affect a victim very much the same way that something that is truly satanic will. But those things don't always respond to the rites of the church in the way that something that is satanic will. And again, by satanic, I even have to qualify that, because you have things like the Church of Satan today. You have Satanists who are not religious-oriented Satanists, which further complicates the issue. These are basically atheists who use the term Satanist, I guess, as a provocation. I'm not quite sure. No one's ever been able to give me a very clear answer from organizations like the Church of Satan why they are so adamant about using that word when it means nothing to them, other than the fact that they like the archetype, I guess. And so I guess the best answer to it is that the archetype of Satan is something that appeals to them in the sense that it's a rebellion against the traditional things of spirituality, like the Judeo-Christian theology. And so they use that as a mark against it, rebellion as a attribute, for example. But most of the Satanists that fall into that category are actually atheists. They don't practice any kind of satanic worship. There are, though, religious Satanists that do. But for our purposes, when we're talking about a satanic demonic event, we are talking specifically about something that is of the actual fallen angel, Satan. Something that is very contrary to God, right, in the Judeo-Christian worldview's context. And if something does not fall into specifically that category, then typically the exorcism is not going to work. Rite of exorcism is not going to really help much. You have to get to the cause of those other problems. There's other things that are non-satanic too, like wrathful spirits. These are people that have lived before and have since died, but died in a state of trauma or a state of agitation or anger, and continue on that sense of hostility in their entire being that is left behind, the spiritual remains, if you will, their non-corporeal nature continues that wrath, and they become very toxic to a person that might come in contact with them. There's also spiritual degradation. Even the death of a loved one who does not cross over and move on can result in a person that attaches in a negative way to a family member and then degrades over time to the point that they eventually
or even if a family member won't let go through the mourning process and let them go, sometimes that entity will be stuck here, and they don't want to be.
Yeah. And that's something that can be very toxic to be around. And so, again, exorcism's not appropriate in those situations. In those situations, it's more pastoral, offering the office of the dead, teaching the family how to pray for the dead, to extend grace to the dead so that they can move on. This becomes paramount in those circumstances, and the least of which would be exorcism. Sometimes even holding Mass at the victim's house is something that can be very helpful in those situations. That can be very complicated, but there are times where it's appropriate. Exorcism would not be. So determining when an exorcism is required is always dependent upon confirmation that what you're dealing with is of a demonic causation. And in this case, mostly satanic in its origination. And that's a complex process, believe it or not. It's not as easy as it sounds. Not even for us.
Lot of what process of elimination.
It is. And a lot of what we do is basically just that. We go in and we have to kind of like peel the layers of an onion, I think was the term. Wasn't that the analogy you used once?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a lot like peeling the layers of an onion, where you have to get to the core of what's going on. And sometimes, you're not hitting the mark. You're getting closer. But if the actual issue is a target and you're trying to hit that target, all of your attempts at coming to the solution might be off the mark until you finally reach that one piece of information that brings it all together. And so that's why we started this whole thing out today, was talking about how to really understand what it is that we are doing when we reach out for help and we think we have a spiritual problem that a priest can resolve. You have to make sure that you're letting them do their work. You're calling on their services, their expertise. It's not appropriate to make those assessments before they've had a chance to actually find out what's going on. And a lot of times the answer is going to be, you need psychological help. That's not an insult to you. And that doesn't even mean that what you're experiencing is not real. It just means that the solution to your issue is going to come back to resolving something that's occurring at a more internal level. And sometimes with the help of pastoral services, like praying over them, working with people on their level is what it's really all about. So we're getting a call from a Tennessee area code here. Hello, from area code 615. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi, how are
I
you?
couldn't let you go without trying to call you in and trying to talk. It's Joan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome. What's your first name?
Joy.
Joy. Oh, Joy. Okay.
It's Joy.
It is Joy. Okay.
You don't recognize her voice?
I did
Yeah,
not
it's
recognize the voice. No, but I wasn't used to the Tennessee area code. So so this is Joy.
Yeah, 'cause
Everyone
you
knows
always
Joy.
called me on Skype.
Yeah, no, you sound different
Yeah,
on Skype.
so-
You do.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to call in because you were talking about like the intake process, and I've actually been through it. And a lot of people don't really even think about what goes into the intake process. And
Yeah.
so that's why they call up and they or they email or they get on social media and start demanding an exorcism, and it's like, no, there's a process. First you have to fill out a form, and then y'all have to actually look at the form.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them because a lot of them are coming in. But then in addition to that, I had to go to where you were because of course I'm in Colorado.
Right.
But I flew out there. This was back when you had a mission church. Now it's a little harder. But I showed up at the church and got an evaluation. And there were all these questions that you guys were asking me. And some of them I never would have thought of even bringing up. And that was one of the things that I think people don't really think about. They don't know about, the investigation part that goes into it. It's not just a bunch of flashing lights and, words coming up on a screen. There's, sometimes, with this situation like this, you need people to actually be involved and asking you questions and where did this start? Where did this come from? Because the more you find where it came from through those questions, you get to figure out, well, what kind of haunting is this? Is this a fallen angel, which is, not very likely? Or is it a situation like mine where it's a wrathful spirit that once it was gone, I started making all my own out of my trauma, and those are created demons? Or is it an elemental that's somewhere in the area and something is wrong, the flow is off, and it's affecting everyone around it? These are the questions that you guys have to ask in order to discern what kind of entity it is so that you can get to the source and address the source cause.
I mean, that's so perfectly stated because, in reality, you mentioned the 4 types of demons that we've talked about on this show before. And there are times where those things overlap, like you just mentioned, where you start with one type of problem that is of a demonic nature that sort of evolves into another kind of demonic problem. And it is perfectly possible that someone could have all 4 types of demons active in their situation, but all happening at different times or through a process of evolution of their issue, particularly when it's left unresolved. And see, that was really, I think, one of the biggest issues that you had, was that you had something that started, and because it wasn't dealt with the way it needed to be dealt with, it continued to grow and derive energy to become other things. And then before you know it, it's this big full-blown problem where it's difficult coming back from.
Yeah. I kind of think of that as almost someone who's like gotten addicted on prescription drugs. You start out with good intentions to feel better, to resolve pain issues, and then you start needing more and more to cover the pain and deal with the pain, and then before you know it, you wake up and you start needing the drug just to function. And no one wants to be an addict, but a lot of times that's how it happens. I saw that a lot when I worked narcotics, is people who legitimately had good reasons for being on pain medications, and it ended up taking over right underneath them, and they didn't even realize what was happening to them until it was too late. So that's kind of an analogy I think of, just from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, well, it is. I mean, there's so much to what we do that it sort of parallels the medical field's process, and a lot of times their assessment, as well as their treatment plans that they set up for patients. It's so much like being a doctor that it really is hard to separate the two. And ideally, you want to work with all aspects of the person's nature. So, I mean, we're not just one thing. We have a physical body, so that obviously has a physiological component that has to be taken care of with a doctor. It's not appropriate to go to a priest for that. And then there's an emotional and psychological component that at one point in our life we're going to be vulnerable in that way. I mean, all of us are. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how great your life has been. Everyone's going to have those moments of emotional and psychological weakness. Everyone will go through that, and everyone can benefit from seeing a psychologist or a psychologist in those times of difficulty. And I think we have such stigma with that.
Absolutely.
And it's not right.
We do. And I that bothers me so much, because my situation, I had a bunch of trauma that happened in my childhood, and I just kind of covered over it, buried it, didn't think about it. But the wrathful spirit that was attached to me was actually one of the people who caused a lot of that trauma and was not willing to let me go. And I remember the moment he attached. It was back in 2009. And so when that was removed, all of that trauma started welling up, and it started making new demons that were also affecting other people. And, trying to figure out, okay, how do I get to the root of this? And of course, I had you to help me, and I saw a therapist. I was talking to a therapist weekly. I was also seeing a massage therapist because some of this was affecting my body.
Yeah.
I was also going to a doctor. I needed surgeries to help with all the issues that were caused by this energetic disturbance that was within me. It wasn't simply that it was making me mentally ill. It made me physically ill. Like, it affects your entire body. And so people will, get sick on top of everything else. And, great, now I'm sick on top of all these other things that are happening. But you're not thinking that sickness is probably connected to all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so I had to have a medical doctor. I had to have a massage therapist who was familiar with energy work. I had to have a psychotherapist. I had to have you talking to me. I had an entire team working on me. And I wasn't even really as bad as some of the people that you saw, during the time that I was, really coming out there even.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's every case is complex and has its own flavor and its own personality that has to be sort of realized in the course of working with a person. And I mean, yours is a great example, Joy, because I mean, you dealt with this courageously, but also you did the things that you needed to do. One of the things that I think is unique to you that I would say I wish more of our clients emulated was actually listening to the things that we say, even in spite of your obvious struggles. And you share those struggles publicly, so it's not a secret to anyone who has followed you. They know the things that you've dealt with and how you've had to deal with them, and you've been very vocal about that, talking about it, communicating those things on the air, even as a co-host to this show once. So they know. But the one thing that you did that few do is actually listen. There are so many people. And it's like another reason, getting back to what we said earlier, where, if a person starts demanding exorcisms in their intake form before they even talk to us, we sort of dismiss the case right off the bat. And some people might say, well, that's not fair. You never even gave the case a chance. Well, but you have to understand, we already know that a person that's doing that isn't looking for professional help. They're looking for validation. And when you don't give them the validation they want, they're not going to listen to you anyway. So it just wastes it wastes the church's resources. It wastes the church's time. It wastes our time, which we have very little of, and there's very little resource to go and take cases like that. But you weren't like that. I mean, not only were you willing to travel and utilize, one of the few people that actually did utilize the mission church and participated in that, and thank God it was there. And if you're the person that got any help out of it, then I guess it was worth it, because there weren't a whole lot of people that utilized it. A few did, but not many. And most of the time people would come and they didn't get the answer they wanted and they would leave. I'm always amazed at how many times people call us and what they're really looking for is validation. What they want is validation. They're not really looking for the solution that you're there for, which is sometimes a difficult pill for anybody to swallow. And there's just nothing you can do about that. There's nothing you can do to help people like that. You have to just let them move on and go from there. But anyway, I'm Bishop Bryan Ouellette. I'm here with Sister Mary Joan, and we got Joy with us as well. And we'll be back shortly after this. Give us a call, 516-453-0138, and we will take you on the air and listen to your questions or, answer anything we can for you. So give us a call and stay tuned.
I'm with you, I am able to keep pushing my limits and all the drive that I have. Well, I'm going the distance with you. I didn't know what I had till I knew what was missing, and everything that I dread. Well, I built a resistance with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. You were gone, I wish you'd stay. I could look at you all day. Time was well spent, that's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you. Take your time, not in the fast lane. I understand that you've been broken too many times, but I'll be waiting to mend your wounds from all you've taken. But if we listen to each other and make our mistakes, then I can show you who I am, because I'm not the same. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. I'm better with you. Catch me when I fall, and I'll keep you off the ground. That's when I knew that I need to spend my life here with you.
Welcome back, everyone, to Vestiges After Dark. I'm Bishop Bryan Ouellette here with my co-host, Sister Mary Joan. We got a caller here on hold. We're going to take another call here in just a moment. Don't go away. We're here for another hour taking your questions. Call in 516-453-0138. Don't be shy. Don't be timid. We don't bite. 516-453-0138. Back in just a moment. Well, thank you all for staying through the break. Again, I'm Bishop Bryan Ouellette for Vestiges After Dark, here with Sister Mary Joan. And if you watch Ghost Adventures, you probably know us from that show. We've been on about 8 episodes now, 7 or 8, I think. You know, what we do is work with paranormal disturbances, and we resolve them. Calling in from the 818 area code in California. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, Father Bryan. My name's Melinda.
Hi, Melinda. How are you tonight?
Shout out to Sister Joan, too.
Oh, yeah.
I'm doing well.
Hey.
Thank you. I had a question, and I'm not quite sure if it's paranormal, but I thought I would call in anyway. I have this thing. I've had, unfortunately, like a lot of people, lots of death in my family. And it started when I was about 9, when I lost my great-great-aunt. And what would happen is a couple of weeks after she would pass away, I would see her at night over my bed, real briefly. And this happened with my great-great-aunt, my grandfather, my uncle, and a couple of my friends. It would literally, each experience was about 2 weeks after I would see them in my bedroom, no matter where I lived. And they would just stand there, but they wouldn't say anything. And then just to go along with that, I have dreams of them where, and the dream is always the same, whether it's the relative or friend or not, but we're walking down the street, and I'm talking and talking and talking, but they just smile and walk with me. And I just wanted to get your take on this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds like somebody's a medium, Bishop.
It does, which is not unusual. And I mean, honestly, a lot of people experience this, particularly relating to death. My father's one. I've experienced this, not maybe to the same magnitude that you have with as many people. What is unique and interesting about what you're describing is that you've had numerous encounters. It would be more common if it were to be maybe one special relative in your life that this happened with. So it sounds to me, this is what I would say, just right off the cuff, you know, not doing obviously any investigation or knowing any of the background here, but what it sounds like to me is that you do have some natural mediumistic abilities, which is not evil. It's not something that is to be worried about. It is common and far more typical. In fact, I would even say completely natural and pervasive. It's usually rooted out of us through conventional education. We focus children's minds on external things like math and arithmetic. You know, you got reading and writing, right? You know, so all of these things that are external focuses, and then of course career and getting married, having children, all of these external things. We don't really do as much focus on the internal, and even those institutions that do, like religion or church, tends to focus it more in just one direction, you know, on God, which is great, and it should be that way. But at the same time, it doesn't really have any protocols in place for when people have the experiences that you're describing. So it sort of either just brushes it under the carpet and ignores that it exists, or at the same time, they become fearful of it. And a lot of denominations in the church do actually not like talking about these types of things because of the ramifications. I know that in the Roman Catholic Church, it's in most Christian churches, in fact, it is really very much believed that there is no such thing as ghosts. That it's you either go to heaven or you go to hell. You don't linger. You're not stuck. Even if you end up in purgatory or limbo, they don't teach that it's here. So, you know, you wouldn't be interacting with ghosts. So there's a pervading mentality that is absolutely wrong, by the way, that any kind of ghosts are rather not so much delusions, but illusions that are produced by the devil to sort of tempt you and trick you into doing things like necromancy and having seances and doing evil witchcrafty things. That's kind of the mentality that the church has. Unfortunately, that is all wrong, and it is not helpful to people that do have these very common experiences. So overall, that's the first thing, is I think you have a natural mediumistic ability. Some people just don't lose it. As some people, actually, it develops as they get older. Maybe they become more spiritual later in life. That sometimes happens, and when that happens, these kinds of external effects can occur as well. At the same time, if you already have that proclivity, the dead aren't stupid. They might be instinctual, but it might be more instinctual, not cognitive. I mean, let's face it, your brain dies with your body, so you don't really have a whole lot of cognitive faculties as a spirit, but you do have instinctual abilities. There is a natural fundamental property of awareness that's inherent within the universe that is obviously already built within the spiritual nature. So spirits are very much aware, and they can think in that capacity, and they are actually very naturally intelligent in that respect, which is why people can communicate with them. And so they know who can communicate with them. Their mediums are like beacons of light to the dead. And when you're stuck, or if there's something that you're unfinished business, or there's just something that leaves them unable to move on immediately, they will often seek out somebody that they can safely convey that message to, even if it's just to make realization as to what's happened to them. Most people do not die well, and I'm not saying that your relatives didn't die well, but most people don't necessarily take the proper preparations because, again, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to shun death and avoid it as long as possible and do everything we can medically to prevent it. And then when it finally does come knocking at our door, we don't know what to do with it, and then we just end up dead and frightened and alone and scared. And now who do we run to? Who do we turn to? The people that can maybe see us, the people that we know. And so that's often another component here. It's impossible to know, without going into more detail as to the nature of the experiences you had, which of those it might be. But my guess would be that since they're family members, and you're getting them in dreams as well as standing at your bedside in your room. Now, I've had that one, but not with family members. I've had it with a spirit that was actually in the house that I lived in once. And I've had my grandmother, I was very close to growing up, when she died, before I knew she died, the night she died, I had a dream of her coming to me in this marvelous garden that was all luminous and bright light and white marble everywhere, and she was all shining in this glowing light that just enveloped her. And we just walked through this garden together for what seemed like countless hours, just talking about our time together in life and how we'll be doing this again when I come and join her. And it was a very interesting, very vivid dream. And I woke up very disturbed by it because it just was so provocative emotionally. And it was one of those dreams that kind of sticks with you, where you just can't shake it. The feeling stays, And and then I got news that morning that about an hour after waking up from it, that she had died. And I didn't even know. But I knew that when I put those two experiences together, I knew that was a genuine paranormal event. And I knew that that was a message. She came to me. She sought me out to, I guess, comfort me, knowing that I would find out soon, and then to let me know she was okay. So a lot of what you have to do when you're talking to when you're encountering these things is to try to find out, do you sense fear or do you sense peace? Because a lot of what spirits, how they communicate is usually through emotions. I hesitate to use the word telepathy because it's got like such a new agey connotation. It's not really telepathy. It's more like just a conveyance of emotion, kind of like when you walk into a room with people that just had a big fight and you can feel the heaviness of the room, even though you weren't there for the fight. It's kind of like that. But likewise, if it's somebody that's there to kind of let you know, look, relax, it's okay, I'm okay, then you'll feel a much lighter feeling in the air. And so if it's light, then usually it's just simply that. They're there to tell you they're okay and let everyone else know that we're okay. If it's heavier, if it's more disturbed, if it's more uneasy, and you feel a sense of fear or agitation or anything that leaves you uncomfortable, then that's when they probably are needing help. And then you would need to do the things that you can do to help them move on.
Okay. Yeah, it is with friends that I've had too. And the emotion, like I said, they don't talk to me. I try to get them to talk to me because I want them to talk. But I've only had, every single experience I've had except for one has always been just peaceful, like a very peaceful feeling out of one. But I did have a friend who unfortunately overdosed. And when he came to me, it was just, I just felt guilt and guilty in the dream and just guilt. So it makes a lot of sense to me because I was raised Catholic and they told me, no. And I just recently in the past 5 years got my spirituality back in, and now I'm figuring things out. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But it's interesting because I only had one person come to me in that dream, and I felt guilt. I felt like I had done something horribly wrong.
Yeah, and see, that kind of death is obviously not a good death. It's not the kind of death that you would ever aspire to have. It doesn't typically end well in those cases, where it usually does leave behind a troubled spirit. Because, see, this is something that you're not going to be taught in CCD class, okay? This is not something that, unfortunately, the church teaches. It's something you have to kind of go into the Eastern world, and you maybe speak to a Buddhist or a Hindu. They might be able to talk to you more accurately about this. But I tend to study all religions, and the work that I do, I work with people and I help people from all religions. So I have to be very knowledgeable about, all of them. And what is really metaphysically going on there is that you become the last thought that you have. So if your last thought is despair, then what you become is a spirit of despair. And the reason they're not able to talk to you is because they probably don't know how. Understand, they lost their brain. Your brain rots with the body. It doesn't go with the spirit. So they have to relearn how to think now at the level of the universe, which is more of an awareness than it is a cognitive, intellectual process that's very logical and orderly, like how our brains work, assuming they're working, in a functional way. Because some people don't experience that. Some people have very dysfunctional brains and they have very disorderly thoughts, and that also can be very detrimental to their afterlife process. So when you're in a state of despair and you become that, then that's all you are left with. That's the only way in which you can communicate is through despair. And same thing with trauma that could lead to maybe wrath. Let's say let's say a murder-suicide, where not only you took a life, but you took your own after taking that life. So now you become wrath and sadness and hatred and anger and aggression and all of these things, and that's all you now are. That's all that's left of you, because you kill off everything else in the suicide. You kill off everything else in the murder. And so you have to resolve that for them, and because they don't have the means to do it anymore. And so that's where the living becomes so instrumental. And so they will often initially seek out people that they feel can perceive them so that they can maybe gain some help. And that's not like they're thinking that. They're not like, oh, look, there she is. She can see us. Let's go. It's not like in the movie Ghost where, he's sort of sitting there watching her all the time. And, it's nothing like that. It's more like instinct. It's like moth to a flame. It's like flies to food. It just knows that this is where I need to go because I can get maybe something what I need there. And a medium is the person that we'll go to, if there happens to be one around. And if it's a family member, all the better. If it's a relative or someone that they knew in life, even if it's a friend or acquaintance, they will go to that person because that's the connection. And there's no distance where they are. It's not like you have to be in the haunted location to encounter that person. There's no distance to cover. At the non-corporeal level, there's only here. There's only right now, right here. There's the idea of time and place is really a linear perception that we create out of the geometry of the universe. But ultimately, there's really only one location, one moment, and that's the now and the here. And once they're in that, coming from where we've been, it's very hard to acclimate when you haven't prepared for it. And who's preparing for it? No one. Unless you're a Buddhist monk, they're preparing for it. But you have to go to some extreme measures in our world today to prepare for the inevitability of death. Otherwise, you just become like Western society, where you do everything you can medically to avoid it until it eventually, gets you, and you hope that it's at a, ripe old age. And a lot of people hope to die in their sleep because they see that as a better way to go, and that's actually one of the worst ways to go. You want to die with your eyes open. As the Buddhists say, die with your eyes open so that you can actually direct your consciousness. So when you know your last breath is coming, if you're paying attention to it, if you've done that work, you know how to prepare for that moment, then you can make your last moment one of love and compassion, one of hope and enthusiasm. And that's what you will become. And that will help to direct you to what we call crossing over, which is necessary. You don't want to get stuck here, in this state. Not here not in the sense that life on Earth, but in the state of harassing the living. So it's good. It sounds like. So let me ask you this: how many times did you encounter the same individual, or was it only once each time?
With my grandfather, it was 3 times, and only my 2 friends. One was murdered when we were in high school.
Oh my! Okay.
Oh Lord!
So he comes to me. Yeah, it was awful. He comes to me frequently. We were really close, and then my friend who OD'd comes to me. He's been gone 6 years, so I want to say maybe 5 times. But those 2 come through the most, are my friends.
And you see them as physical, like you see them with your actual eyes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In my dreams, or when I see them?
No, when you see them in the room, it's like with your eyes.
Oh. I know who it is. It's the basic shape, and I feel the personality. Like, it's really hard to describe, but I know if I look up and I see this silhouette that stands this way, I know it's my friend Matt. Or if I see the one that's not coming close to me, I know that it's my other friends who OG. I can definitely tell who they are.
Interesting. Yeah, see that
there's no doubt about it.
The fact that they're still coming to you tells me that they're needing help.
Yeah, the way they died, they're stuck here, and they're coming to you because they were comfortable with you, and you're kind of like their lighthouse.
See, that makes me feel horrible because high school was over 30 years ago.
Well, see, but again,
there's no time.
There's no time for them.
Okay.
Yeah, so they probably don't even realize that it's been 30 years. For them, they're probably still reliving the last moments that they were alive, and they've been stuck in that moment indefinitely. And so for them, the passage of time is not really relevant, and your ability to help them does not change just because it's been all these decades. Coming from the Catholic worldview, this will be even more useful because you don't have to unlearn some of your biases that you might have against the Catholic faith. You already have been a part of it, so it should be easy to integrate. It's a very simple prayer. You can buy the Office of the Dead if you want to really get more elaborately into helping them, or you can even go online and find the Office of the Dead and pray it directly from that. But in lieu of doing that more formal prayer, which is an actual liturgy that the laity can perform themselves at home, you don't need a priest for that. You can also pray the very simple prayer, "Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them." And you just pray that daily, particularly when you feel them come to you or if you encounter them in a more deliberate way. So if they're at the foot of your bed when you wake up one night, having to go to the bathroom, and you see them there, that's when you say it. Repeat it 3 times. And then if it's a dream and you wake up, then say it 3 times upon waking up. It's a very simple prayer. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. One of the most powerful things that you can do for the dead, and I have never known in all my career it not to almost instantaneously work. I have never had a client come back to me and say, I've been doing this and they're still here. Every single one, even the skeptics, even the Catholics or even the non-Christians that came to me and were very skeptical of whether we could actually help them or not. You gave them that, told them to do it, and it has worked. It works over and over again. So this is the easiest and best way to help in those circumstances.
Okay, I'm gonna, when this show's done, I'm gonna buy that book and I'm gonna try that because I want to help, but I just don't know how.
You can also do an office for the dead, and if you want to email us with the names at office@Nicholean.org, we can put their names on the altar for Mass.
Oh, that would be great. That
Absolutely.
would be wonderful. Thank you.
What we can also do, if you've after these measures, and this is what we would do for an actual client in a circumstance that would come to us and say, this is what I'm having as a disturbance and I need your help or guidance. What we would do is exactly what we told you. So we would teach you this prayer. The Office of the Dead is a very simple thing. You can just get it from the Divine Office. So you can go on Amazon. There's a little red book called Christian Prayer. It's like $30, I think. And at the back of the book is the Office of the Dead. And you can use that one. There's even an online version. You can just pray it off your computer or tablet if you don't want to purchase anything. But at the same time, we would put the names, if you know the names, and you do, fortunately. It's not like some anonymous ghost that's showing up and you don't know who it is. That happens a lot. And that becomes hard because now you got to get the name. But since you know who these individuals are, we can put their names on the altar and pray for them at Mass. And if after all that you're still encountering this, what we can do is actually a Mass for the dead, where we would do a funeral Mass for those individuals. And you can actually participate that online. We can live stream it for you. And you can pray with us in real time, where we would offer a Mass for them to cross over and be received into the kingdom, and that is usually all it takes.
Okay, but that's great because I don't think if I would have found my spirituality 5 years ago, I would be in the headspace to deal with it because I was told so often that it was wrong and evil. Yeah. But now it makes me feel a lot better.
We've had a lot of clients that tell us the same thing. And you're not evil, you're not wrong. This is a gift, in my opinion. It's just a matter of learning how to harness it.
It is a gift.
Yeah, I've been looking into ways to doing that too, just so I can have some peace too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just so I can.
Yeah, there has to be boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to take up all your time, but I want to thank you so much for taking this phone call. You've helped me immensely.
No, we appreciate you calling in. Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that. Somewhat personal, but very powerful, experience, and I think we can definitely help. This is one of those calls where it's something we can do remotely. We don't have to come visit for that. So we love being able to help any chance we get. So thank you so much for calling.
That's great. Thank you. You guys have a good night.
Take care.
Take care,
you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's sister, that's a great example, I think, of what this work's really all about.
Yeah.
People,
a lot of our cases can be resolved over the phone with just and I'm sure Sister Max can back me up on that. A lot of times, just talking to the clients, figuring out what the issue is. A lot of times, you can give them advice over the phone, and it solves the issue for them.
Exactly. I mean, how often do we take care of clients? This is why I always emphasize, like, if we're going to take intakes on the website, let's at least reach out to every single client, even if it's just by email. And I know that gets difficult because we've got so many coming in, and there's only so many of us and only so much resources, and everyone's doing this completely voluntarily. There's no career here. There's no income here, so people can't devote necessarily full time to this, but it's important to reach out to everyone that reaches out to us as often as possible, because a lot of times they don't need anything major. It can sometimes be simply a prayer or something offered at the Mass, and if they can now, with thankfully the miracles of technology, we can live stream a Mass and we can share a Mass with them. I mean, that's a wonderful thing that we can do. Yeah. So, hopefully in the future, more will realize this, that, it's not always necessary that you get a house visit when we have to figure out a way to set up an expensive, flight out to you from some other state. I mean, we can do a lot, remotely. There's a lot that can be done. We can teach you.
Yeah, nothing frustrates me more than just like this last caller. She obviously has a gift, or she's sensitive, and she's been afraid to talk about it because her whole life she's been told it's wrong, it's evil. And, a lot of our clients, we have to almost drag that out of them because they're afraid to tell us. And once we break that barrier and start a rapport with them, the floodgates open up.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating to have, people who are genuinely needing assistance, and they're scared to cry out for help because their whole lives they've been taught, no, you can't. And that's what I hope podcasts like this and our ministry can get out to people, that there are people out there that will help you, and we're not judging anyone.
No, and it is a shame. It's such a shame that it's come to this, because as well as I do that we are hated by certain conventional institutions in the church for being this way, for being so non-judgmental, and for helping people at their level, but also talking about things that the church doesn't like talking about. Think of the great disservice. I love Roman Catholicism. Don't get me wrong. I'm not happy with the way the church is today, but I still love the religion. I will always love the religion. This is why, when we had to decide a few years back whether or not to, when we knew having both the East and West of the Holy Nicholean Catholic Church in the West and the Holy Imperial Russian Orthodox Church in the East was superfluous, because we just weren't large enough to even run two churches. In fact, we weren't even large enough to really run one. So to run two seemed ridiculous, and we had to decide which one to keep. Do we take the Eastern one or we take the Western one? Part of the reason why we stayed with the Western church, and even though we have Eastern flavors built into Nicholean Catholicism, it's still it's a Western Mass. Roman Catholics can come to our church and they will recognize everything about what we do. There's nothing terribly mysterious about it to them. And the reason why we went the Roman Catholic way is because I have such a great nostalgic love for it. Not that I don't love Orthodoxy. I love it. It's a hell of a lot more complicated. And we would need a lot more volunteers to offer a divine liturgy than it would be to offer the Roman Catholic Mass, which can actually be done even by oneself if need be. But it's such a shame, because they're teaching things that they think is right, and they're doing so much harm, not just to the living in a individual like this, like our last caller, but also to the dead, who can be helped.
Yep.
They can be helped. And the church should know this, because praying for the dead is something that they aspire, that they teach all Christians should aspire to do. But the problem is they can't get past the paradigm that you're only praying for those in purgatory. But they're not really understanding that purgatory is, first of all, not a location. And it's a lot more than just simply burning off the rest of your imperfections before you're ready for the kingdom. It's more than just that. It also does include those who haven't crossed over. So our prayers for those that are stuck, and yes, people in purgatory do appear as ghosts. They do. It's, I guess maybe the best pop culture reference for it would be A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens. The whole idea of Jacob Marley being, of course, he was more damned, but you could almost argue, though, that part of his motivation of helping Scrooge was actually some type of redemption, maybe even for himself, or at the very least, if he did an action that was of a selfless act of redemption on the behalf of Scrooge, that maybe somehow that would eventually, unbeknownst to him, heal his condition too, and he would no longer be stuck in this state. it's a complicated process. We're such linear thinkers that we just think in terms of, well, the good people go to heaven and the bad people go to hell, and it's so much more involved than that. We might be able to experience both heaven and hell numerous times while we're alive, let alone waiting to die and end up in some location that's not a location at all, but rather a condition that is built out of our failings as well as our hope. So heaven is really dependent upon how much hope you have, and hell is really dependent upon how much despair you have. And usually we're a mixture of both. There are times where we're hopeful, there's times where we despair. Which means heaven and hell is something that's familiar to both of us. It's not just some crazy little afterlife somewhere that's eternally punishment or eternal happiness. It's much more complex than that. And we need to understand that, and the church needs to teach that. I hope we've done that, you and I, and Sister Maximilian, and those like Joy who are courageous enough to come on and talk about their testimony and help in the way that they have. For those of you who are listening and have been listening for the whole show, our first caller, Joy, that called in, she put up a wonderful series on the Rosary that you can find at esotericcatholic.org. You can also find it on our YouTube channel. So if you're listening on YouTube and you've been just look up the Nicholean Catholic Church on YouTube and find our channel. And go to the playlist of the Rosary. She created these wonderful metaphysical meditations for those that are non-Catholic, or I should say those that are maybe even non-Christian, or maybe they were Christian but they fall away from the church because it's too dogmatic for them, or what of the many reasons that people could have for falling away. And maybe some of the more New Agey stuff appeals to you. I think you're going to find something in that too, because these meditations are very neutral. There's a little bit of Eastern flavor in them. There's also a lot of traditional components to them. They're remarkably well done, and she worked very hard on them. Took her actually several months to get them just the way she wanted them, because she was such a perfectionist about it. Listen to these. Even if you don't get a rosary and pray it physically, listen to them, because you can pray it along with the meditation that she created. And she did that as not just a service, I think, to the church, but also as a means of even self-healing, to be part of the church in a more deliberate way, which is something I think we're all called to do. And she responded to that call, which is a tremendous action of grace that I think is just beautiful to watch and witness. And so we're very grateful to her for that. And I hope that you all who are listening to this will seek them out. I know that they have received hundreds upon hundreds of downloads, and they've been listened to thousands of times. And that was, I'm sure, maybe comes to a surprise to Joy. I don't know. But I think that she'll be very happy to hear that. If she's still listening. I think she is. But yeah, she is, because I just see her commenting in the live chat right now. We still got time for another caller. We're here on the air for 20 more minutes. So if you would like to call in at 516-453-0138, that's 516-453-0138. We'll be more than happy to take your call. Hear whatever stories you have to tell us, or answer any questions you might have, any kind of paranormal disturbances that you would like some kind of expert opinion on. One of the things I should mention, and I didn't think about this at the time because it's been so long since I've worked with Blog Talk Radio, is that Blog Talk Radio very much is it operates like a true network. So you schedule your shows, it goes into their I guess, menu of shows that are coming up and the schedule for the week. And people that are Blog Talk Radio members it's free to become a member of Blog Talk Radio. You just go and set up your account and you can listen and follow whatever shows interest you. And they will, you can go into the schedule and see what shows are coming up. And if you find a podcast that you really like, you can follow it and look at what their upcoming shows are. I created this on the cuff. Today, I just got, I think Sister Mary Joan said I got a hair up my ass, which is exactly what happened.
That was similar to what I said.
Well, I mean, it's what you meant.
Maybe.
And I don't know what it was. I just felt compelled to bring this show back. I felt that I guess what it is I've been you said we hadn't done a show since April, and I've been, I would say at least once or twice a week, I get at least an email or a message that says, when are you doing another episode? I missed this show. And so I guess that had been on my mind, and I was like, well, I want to bring it back, but it gets tiring talking to myself. So, I want to maybe start bringing on guests that we can, talk to about various topics. I might consider that. But I thought it'd be fun to really just start talking to the audience and seeing what is on their mind, and maybe doing what we do on Twitter, but as a show now, instead of just, answering a tweet with a limited number of characters and not really able to convey the answer correctly or accurately or completely. So, so it just, I don't know, it just got to me. I've been dealing with this sinus infection for the last about a week now. I'm just finally starting to feel better, which is a real wonderful thing. So now I'm at this point where I feel like, I am fully ready to do something new and have some fun and bring this show back. So here we are. We're doing it. We're living with it. And yes, I got the hair up my ass, and
sometimes that's all right.
Sometimes it's all right.
In the chat room.
Oh, well,
that's all right.
In
the chat room a ways back, we had a question from Roy, which is an interesting question for you. Trying to find it. It was back a ways.
Go ahead and find it. I'm going to bring a caller on right now. Go ahead and find it, and we'll take that in a minute. But we got from the 608 area code out there in Wisconsin. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, I'm Adria from Wild Rose, Wisconsin.
Hello, Adria. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
I'm shaking right now.
No, don't be nervous. Right. Look, it's no big deal. Just you're just talking to us right now. Don't worry about the audience. Don't worry about the people listening. It does not matter.
So I'm got kind of I guess you could say it a ghost story. It happened at my late grandparents' cottage early May. So I went over there. I was, getting some of the clothes, folded up, put away, and some tins while listening to Joss Stone's Mind, Body, and Soul. And at some point while I was putting away, I heard kind of an older man say, "Hi." And I was the only one in the cottage. So, of course, there were a couple of neighbors up. We had to, acknowledge, one another,
So you heard a voice. You heard it with your ears, like it wasn't inside your mind.
Yeah.
It was something that you heard audibly.
Yeah. I've been in this cottage like probably over 1,000 times since I was a baby. So it's like I was so familiar with this place. I've heard the sound of the cottage door opening and closing so many times that the sound is now engraved in my brain. I never heard that sound while I was over there till my mom came over, which is probably sometime after 2 p.m.
Yeah. I mean, again, these are things that could be multiple possibilities. Well, first, before I even answer that, did you experience anything else in the cottage, or was that the only thing that you encountered?
I think sometime before that, I thought I heard someone knocking at the door that leads into the house from the porch, But of course, walking out there, no one was there. But that one, I don't really. I kind of just brushed it off. I was probably just it was probably just the way the shades were on the door or something.
Yeah, I mean, and it is easy to try to find some logical conclusion and sort of, brush it off and say, oh, it must have been that. Because a lot of times these experiences are so subtle that it would be very common for us to just go ahead and say, well, there's got to be a reasonable explanation for it, kind of like Occam's razor, and say, the simplest explanation has got to be the truth, which means it's definitely not going to be any kind of paranormal thing. It's got to be something that's we're just not paying attention to, or something that we're, our imaginations are embellishing. The thing is, though, that actual paranormal activity does in fact exist. Sister Mary Joan and I have obviously experienced it numerous times. We wouldn't be doing what we do if we were wondering whether or not maybe there's a chance it's not real. No, we've experienced enough in our lives to know that it's genuine, and strange things do in fact happen. And when they do happen, it's usually of the subtle nature. Most of the time, it's nothing more than maybe a voice that you heard or a knock at the door. Knocking at the door is actually a real big one. It's actually one of the things that we ask when we do an assessment. Is there a knock at the door? No one was there. Did that ever happen? Because that's a very common way in which spirits attempt to communicate with the people that may be there or may be living there. It's something that's familiar instinctually, that you don't have to think about knocking at the door. You just know that when you go to the door and you want the door to be answered, you just instinctually know that you either knock or ring the doorbell. You don't have to think about that. That's automatic. And for spirits, that's exactly how they operate, because everything they do is on automatic. They like we talked about with the last caller, there's no cognitive process anymore. There's no brain to think with anymore. So everything is done at an awareness level that's more ethereal and more instinctual and more automatic. And so, the process of knocking at the door is something that is familiar. It's something that no one doesn't require any kind of cognitive process. You just, to do it. And that's what they'll do. And then, the people will inevitably go to the door and answer it, and there's no one there. And sometimes it can be literally in a voice that you hear. Now, most of the time, it's going to be at a frequency that the human ear typically cannot hear very well. And that's where EVP and spirit box communication, SB7, SB11, that type of thing can be helpful. But occasionally, when there's enough energy, you can hear it audibly. And sometimes what's very interesting about the phenomenon is when you hear it audibly and you have a recorder going, oftentimes you don't catch it on the recorder.
Nope.
It's weird. And we don't exactly know why that is, other than the fact that it must be happening at different levels of reality that we don't have fully understood or broken down yet. But what you're experiencing there could be numerous things. So it could be a family member. I guess, did you recognize the voice, or was it not something that was distinctive enough?
I think from the voice, it did sound like it could have been, my grandpa who passed late September of 2019.
Okay.
So it was probably almost.
And he was a frequent visitor to the cabin or the cottage.
Yeah, in the cottage. Yeah, he did live in the cottage that he had bought, and then towards the end of the life, he did kind of stay at our place, which was kind of periodically at first. Kind of help take care of him as he got older.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
So it was probably just stopping by, saying hi. I would go over there.
I don't think there's anything
granddaughter.
for you to. I don't think there's anything for you to worry about. I think that the conditions were just right for you to hear it. It was quiet, and whoever that spirit was, maybe been your grandpa, he was just saying hello. But I wouldn't worry about it if that's all of you. If that's all you experienced, and it didn't, scare the hell out of you or give you chicken skin or objects started flying. I think that's just fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Nothing to worry about.
I agree completely with what Sister Mary Joan just said. Absolutely. That doesn't sound like there's anything there that would be of a spirit attachment kind of nature, or something that would require resolution. All I would say is if it does happen again at some point where you encounter it, either there or at home or even, in a dream like the last caller, the same thing that we instructed before applies here. The very simple prayer. You don't even need to be Catholic to say it. It's just a simple prayer, eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon them. And it helps them move on. It does two things. It does, on one level, it's genuinely a prayer. It's a conveyance of grace. So what you're doing is you're calling upon the power of the Holy Spirit to aid whoever may need it that is in that particular condition. So that's the first thing it does, and that's the most important one. But there's also an archetypal aspect to it, where it sort of reminds the individual who might be lingering that they are in fact dead, and there is a place for them to go to. For lack of a better word, it's not a place, but there is there is a process to what we call crossing over that must take place in order for there to be a healthy transition. And if there is anybody that's lingering, then that can be a way of helping them. At the same time, there's also a more benign possibility to what you've experienced. There are times where our own energy gets imprinted into the environment, and what you heard there could have been literally a recording, an ethereal recording of when he was alive in that room saying hi to someone, and it just got replayed now. And sometimes it could even be something, and I'm going to sound really Star Trek-y and metaphysical here, it can sometimes literally be a crossing of the streams of movement where where you encounter a former time where he was there and alive, and the barrier between the moment when he said those words and you breaks down a little bit, because again it gets back to the very complex metaphysics that we don't really exist in linear time like we think we do. That's strictly it's a construct. It's a human construct. It's a conveyance of the way that we look at reality, but it's not actual, and particularly not at that spiritual level where time is kind of irrelevant, and so is location and distance, and everything's just movement, and sometimes movement crosses into other streams of movement. And so since everything's really kind of happening now anyway, it stands to reason that occasionally we might end up hearing something or even seeing something from another time. And that explains a lot of these repetitive hauntings that you sometimes see, where, like the Lady in White stories that you hear, where someone was murdered, and at the same time every night on this such and such street, it's reported that you see this ghost walking out to her death or whatever. That's kind of the same mindset that can occur. All of that's possibility. All of it's benign. The only time we would worry is if you were having this kind of interaction on a regular basis and you started getting sick from it. That's when we would have to say, this is an attachment. We might need to actually start looking into solutions for resolving that. But I'm not seeing signs of that. So it's at the very best, it's really just he cares, and he showed up for a moment to say that, hi, he misses you. But thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate the story, and feel free to call back on another day when we do another show.
Thank you, Adria.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have a wonderful night. Yeah, that's another good
Bishop,
one. That's a good one.
Yeah, a lot of these things are mundane. Most things are mundane. They're not going to hurt you. Not everything's demonic. Very few things are demonic.
Very few.
I did find the question in the chat room from Roy.
Oh yeah.
Let's see if you can. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Demons may not have the intentions of being malevolent and are used sometimes to help, someone. Does the level escalate? Does religion change the degree of those actions of demonic actions?
Okay, read it again one more time. I want to make sure I'm understanding exactly what he's saying. So say it one more time.
Demons may not have the intentions of being malevolent and are used to sometimes help someone, I guess is what he's saying. Does the level escalate? does religion change the degree of those actions of demonic actions?
Yeah, well, definitely in
You might need to
wrathful
clarify, Rick, if you're
spirits.
still with us.
Yeah, wrathful
Yeah.
spirits often, not always, some of them do, but wrathful spirits sometimes are causing affliction to a person unintentionally, and certainly, usually. So it's sometimes with wrathful spirits, and it's usually with elementals. They're not intending to do it. That's just their nature, and you come in contact with them, or maybe they happen to be in the location where your house is, and now there's a factor of dissonance there that has to be resolved. So in those particular cases, I mean, yes, religion plays a role because the person's worldview is always going to color and flavor the experience. And for somebody that's having what they interpret as a demonic encounter, they're just going to want that. They're going to want that out of their life. They're not going to want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, sometimes you have to be aggressive. So I always kind of consider exorcism to be a last resort, sort of like pushing the nuclear, turning the nuclear keys.
Yeah.
It's when you've tried everything, and the particular spirit that you're dealing with absolutely will not negotiate, will not comply, will not work with you. And at that point, it becomes a violation of that person's life, their body, or their their home, whatever is being disturbed. And you have to do something about that. So in a case like an elemental, where we're not necessarily dealing with somebody who is intending to cause harm, but they are, then you try to make the environment less compatible with their nature. And hopefully that by doing so, they move on. But on occasion, you'll end up with a situation where there's wrathful spirits and they are intending to do harm. And you don't necessarily know what to do for them other than remove them by force. And there's nothing else you can do. Great question and great callers tonight. Thank you guys for calling in. I hope we get more callers next time. We will probably set up later this week. I haven't decided. I'll talk with Sister Mary Joan to find out when's a good time to do our next show. But we will look at that and look at the schedule and see when we will do it. And I'll try to set it up. What I forgot to say, and Blog Talk Radio has that schedule. And I set this up last minute, so all of the Blog Talk Radio audience didn't have a chance to actually even see that we were doing a show tonight. So we didn't even get anybody listening from Blog Talk Radio tonight because the show was too spontaneous. So the only people that really watched were fans from social media and also those that are already following the channel on YouTube. So make sure you follow us on Blog Talk Radio, follow us on YouTube. And we will have more shows coming up. I'll probably do about 2 or 3 a week now for maybe a block of 15 episodes for one full season. See how it goes. Hopefully you guys will keep
90 seconds.
Anyway, you take care.
All right, you heard it.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody take care.
Yeah. Thank you, sister.
Ready,
I appreciate
and see
you.
Next time.
Let's talk about when we'll do it next time, okay?
Sounds good. All right, good night, everybody.
Right.
God bless.
Thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you for listening. I might not always have the chance to say it, but I do absolutely care about each and every one of you, and I really appreciate all of you who are such loyal, dedicated followers.
60
participate
seconds.
in the work that we do, and watch Ghost Adventures, watch the shows, watch our feeds, and are a fan of podcasts like this. Thank you all. Take care. God bless. Until next time.
Seconds. Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.